Okay, everybody. Right, the background of Baron-Cohen. So this study is called Another Advanced Test for Theory of Mind, Evidence for Very High-Functioning Adults with Autism or Asperger's Syndrome. Oh, crikey, what's that about? Okay, right, let's keep going. Okay, do you know what I'm thinking or feeling? This is what essentially the study is about. Can autistic individuals tell the emotion from eyes? It's known as subtle mind reading. They say that the eyes are a window to the soul, and adults with autism, high-functioning adults, which means that they're clever and they're academic and they're not severely autistic, but they still struggle with social interaction. And so Baron-Cohen was trying to find out, was this down to the eyes? What does autism mean? It means self-orientated, which is coined that term because they do seem to be in their own world. Some autistic individuals, depends on the severity of the autism. So they can only think that there's one way of doing things and it's their way, and they can't understand when other people want to do things a different way. It was first coined by Leo Kanner in 1943, who noticed a collection of similar traits in children. He called Kanner's syndrome is autism, but at the severe end of the scale. So highly autistic individuals who can't interact with the outside world, they have what's called Kanner's syndrome. So some characteristics of autism: communication issues, social isolation, so they're withdrawn, they're alone, obsessive and compulsive behaviours. So they keep going over the same things, doing the same things. They won't want to go different routes to school. They'll want to wear the same clothes or their favourite clothes all the time. Repetitive behaviour patterns might be just spinning wheels of toys constantly, or twirling their hair around their finger, but repeating those same behaviours. Finding things unpredictable, treat objects like people alike. So they don't see why a person might act according to their own free will or just wander off somewhere. Why doesn't the table also do the same? They don't understand that these other people have minds, and whereas the objects in the room don't have minds. Sensory alertness, so they can be very sensitive to being touched, and their skin can be extremely sensitive. Lack of imaginative play, so they won't be able to play let's pretend and, let's have a tea party and those kind of things. You'd notice at primary school that they didn't want to get involved with that kind of thing. Usually they end up with below average IQ, and, is that because they aren't bright, or is it actually because the tests don't measure their particular intelligence? There's issues with that statement. So what is Asperger's syndrome? Asperger's syndrome is kind of seen as the milder form of autism, like Einstein had Asperger's. Normal IQ levels, normal language development. It's more difficult to spot someone with Asperger's. There's probably some of your friends have it and you wouldn't necessarily know. So it's the term used, an autistic spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a term used to describe the variety of related characteristics on the autistic spectrum. It's referred to as spectrum because it can condition from severe, the classic autism, all the way across to Asperger's and normal. So what we regard as normal, but even normal individuals would see themselves as having recognisable conditions. I see certain traits in autism that I possess, and most people do say, I do that from time to time. So we're all on that scale somewhere. 1 in 100 people have it, 4 times as many males than females. Theory of mind. This is what Baron-Cohen coined the term. It's another way of looking at that is empathy. But theory of mind is the ability to recognise and appreciate other mental states, the other mental states of other people. So the ability for you to be able to understand that somebody else is thinking or feeling different to how you are. And people with autism can struggle with that, especially children with autism can really struggle with that. Why is this person not handing me the drink when I want the drink now? They don't understand that they have to communicate that to that person because that person isn't thinking the same thing as them. So a theory of mind is really that you understand what mind means. If you have a theory of mind, you understand the meaning of the word mind, that other people have different minds. The way that this used to be tested, this was invented by Baron-Cohen in an earlier study. I didn't mention it. Baron-Cohen is actually, Simon Baron-Cohen is the cousin of Sacha Baron-Cohen, i.e. Ali G and Borat. So there you go. Anyway, in his earlier study, he invented the Sally-Ann test, and this is how you can measure autism in very young children. You say, Sally has a basket and Anne has a box. Sally puts her red ball into the basket, and Sally goes and leaves the room and leaves Anne alone. Anne takes the ball out and puts it into the box. When Sally comes back, where is Sally going to look for her ball? Because she wants to play with the ball. Now, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but Sally is going to look into her basket. Autistic children will say she will look in the box, because they don't understand that Sally has different information in her head than they do, or Anne does. They believe everybody has the same information. So even though Sally was out the room when the ball was moved, they don't understand that. So that is an easy way to identify a child who has autism. The problem with that test is when you're trying to discover what problems adults with autism have. Adults with autism learn theory of mind. So they understand how they can learn why Sally doesn't look for a ball in the box, and they understand that other people have. So you can learn a theory of mind, but they still can struggle with things like social interaction. So they're known as first and second order theory of mind test. The Sally-Ann test is the first order theory of mind test. But there was a ceiling effect that prevented individuals from showing anything other than a basic understanding of people's thoughts and feelings, only basic theory of mind. So Happ's strange story, Francesca Happ developed another test for 8 to 9-year-olds, which was aimed at that kind of level, but even adults with autism can still struggle a little bit with this. But these are theoretical tests. These are things where you have to read something and decide a scenario. The difference with what Baron-Cohen is going to produce in the core study is that is an eye task where you have to judge somebody's eyes immediately and decide what state they're thinking. So it's a much more practical one about subtle mind reading from eyes that Baron-Cohen comes up with. But the Happ Strange Stories test, Baron-Cohen also uses the Happ Strange Stories in the study because he finds a positive correlation. If you're poor at the Happ Strange Stories, you're also poor at his new test. And so this provides him evidence that perhaps there is that his new test does measure theory of mind. It's what's called concurrent validity, where one existing test, Happ Strange Stories, correlates with your new test, Baron-Cohen's eye test. So, Happ Strange Stories, let's see how you can do. Yesterday, Mrs. Brown's dog Jessie died. Today, Mrs. Brown was going out with her friend shopping. At first, she was considering cancelling. However, after some thought, she decided she would still go. While she was out, with her friend, they went to many shops, and although they didn't buy anything. In the cafe in the town centre at lunch, she suddenly started crying. Her friend did not notice that she was bringing the food over that they had ordered. As she was bringing the food over. When she got back to the table, Mrs. Brown had gone. So why did Mrs. Brown leave suddenly? Autistic people will give you an answer about the fact that she might have left something in a shop, or she might need to go somewhere. They won't pick up on the fact that it's because she was crying, and it's because a friend hasn't realised it's crying, or it's because the dog died. They won't understand that subtlety to the answer. So they will do poorly on that test. And a similar one, a control test item, a short story, a physical one. Sarah is very long-sighted. She only has one pair of glasses, keeps losing them. And Ted goes straight to the post office. Why is the post office the most likely place to look? It's because she went there first. But they would do fine on that. They would be able to get that as a control test. But when it involves understanding other people's emotions, in the top one, the experimental test item, autistic people struggle with it. People without autism don't struggle with it. So, on to the next video. Have a watch. What was it that Baron-Cohen actually did? So he is actually using an eye test to try and identify them, because these previous tests, the Sally-Ann test and this one, doesn't show you why adults with autism can struggle with subtle mind-reading deficits, all the way back to the start of being able to tell the emotion from somebody's eyes. So he wants to know, why is it that autistic adults, or is it that autistic adults will struggle with telling the emotion from eyes? Thanks all.